Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Crawl.
Hello.
This week, finally, like how many of you will probably have felt in your D&D group, hey guys, let's do this thing, set it up, talk about things, when are we gonna play?
When? Never. It never happens. You keep pushing it off. You just gotta take the jump, take the leap of faith.
And the leap of faith is this episode, but I believe we're starting with the D&D prep side of things, so just wait a little bit longer. But this time on the Dungeon Crawl, Session 1.
The big old Session 1. After you finish Session 0, the inevitable step is Session 1.
And our secret Session 0.5 episode, who you can only see it in book form. Sorry, we have a book now going on our Patreon, which we don't have. I'm kidding.
Classic.
I'm sure we'll have it at one point.
Just pull the rug out from underneath them.
Do it. You gotta keep them on their toes, especially during Session 1 when nobody knows what's going to happen.
Nobody except for, actually, not even the DM knows.
Not even the DM.
Nobody
if you prep
knows.
the way that we do.
Yeah. As they say,
Literally,
no plan is safe once the players reach it.
Yeah, unless they want a railroaded experience, which is a different thing.
Different story for a different
Very different
podcast.
Let's just have as many podcasts as possible. That's how you get popular. Just like 40 of them.
Ooh.
It'd be tough. Have one viewer for each of them. That's 40 people.
That fills up a room.
It does, unless it's the same viewer.
They could fill up a confessional booth.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, they're a big fan. I'm sure they'd
half of
support
one.
us big enough. But Ryan.
I got a question for you.
Oh, I was going to ask you a question, but you asked me a question.
Yeah, I figured I beat you to the punch. So you recently had a short-lived kind of campaign, and I wasn't there for the very beginning.
Yes.
I'm curious, because I've been there too, a couple times now, starting a D&D campaign. How did you go about starting and prepping for Session 1?
Oh man, now I got to think back.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
It has been it's been probably exactly about a year since we've done that.
Uh-huh.
Oh boy. And that was before I did
Well,
my
maybe
whole study
more
abroad.
think about
Yeah.
the feelings, the things that you were worried about going into Session 1. Maybe not your
literally
specific prep.
everything,
Everything.
which I should not have been. That's
Well,
the opposite of what
I think it's inevitable to be worried about every little detail. I mean, I guess, do you mean every detail as in you wanted to prep everything?
Of course I had that desire, but once we got started,
Uh-huh.
and this is jumping ahead a little bit, it felt as though I was either, I don't know, blindfolded or like I had a very short sight. Like I could see 15 feet in front of me, D&D, and nothing else. And then I'm just like driving at 90 miles an hour. I'm like, what is happening? I have to have the next thing coming up, and they're going this place and that place.
So you just didn't have the flow down, I guess.
Yeah, the flow is the hardest part. But
Yes.
for the prep and where we started, I think I just thought of a theme I really enjoyed, and I believe it was kind of Lovecraft. And
Ooh.
I made a starting town with some interesting things around it. And the whole, I guess, what I now know as to be little secrets I'd want my characters or players to find, I had started coming up with those in the form of certain NPCs representing Lovecraftian stories or themes, and if they ran into it, they would. Otherwise, I had a small dungeon set, a couple of main NPCs that I would have there for them to interact with that were more fleshed out. Otherwise, I improv'd basically everything.
Improv's your greatest friend as a DM.
Well, now it doesn't, but back then when I had put in minimal work, it felt guilty.
I don't think that's the way you should feel about it.
But it happened though, because they were just like, "Wow, this is awesome." I'm like, I didn't do any of this.
And that's definitely happened for me before with you guys, where you really loved the session or really loved a section, and I just like pulled that out of my ass at the last moment. But I mean, I think that says a lot about the players that you're with, as well as the experience of improving and the world and what you're able to do with your players. So it's really, D&D isn't a one-sided game. There's a lot of give and take going on. Like the rules of improv. You gotta trade back and forth. And so if you're able to pull off some cool scenes improvised, because I mean the players are doing everything improvised. So
That is very true.
I think it's really cool if you can do something like that.
I never thought about that. Huh.
Yeah, because you don't know what's coming up next. I've done the most prep, and you guys are just kind of showing up.
Well, let me ask you, the couple of times that you've been a player, how have you prepared?
I mean, the most prep that I do, for session 1 as a player, is to just know my character, really. Just kind of have the backstory, what makes my character who they are, how they would interact with certain people that they might meet. Have an accent if I want one, some mannerisms down, and that's about it. Obviously, I can refer to my sheet if I forget some of that stuff, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to be a player, I would say. Not that it isn't difficult, but you're playing a game. That's for fun.
Yeah.
I was basically sweating the whole time, and though I felt prepared, this group, I don't know, I had work at the time, and we just happened to be in a group chat. We were all speaking. We were doing this online, and they blindsided me, and they go, "Hey, let's just do it now." And it's like, I don't know. I can't think of a great analogy for it right now, but just asking somebody to just DM right now.
Yeah, I think I'd have
I'm sure all of you DMs out there right now are just like, yeah, no. give me a week or like at least a couple hours of
I'd freak out, man.
I'd be like, huh? What? But I know there are some DMs out there that could probably do it just because they know
think it's like a comedian though. If you say, yeah, I do stand up, and someone just turns up,
do a routine right now.
Yeah, tell me a joke, man.
Tell me a joke.
Do me something fun. Tell me something funny. Do it.
Yeah. So we ended up starting the session from there. It did make it a bit more difficult because I was using Tabletop Simulator.
Yes, that's a whole different ball game.
Because that definitely needed some prep and getting the models in there. But that was my session 1 for that. I had my medium of communication and where we were playing. So that was Tabletop Simulator. I needed to make sure I had all the models or all the spaces for them and any in-game dice that they wanted to use. I was letting them use dice on there, and if they felt like it, because I trust them not to fudge the numbers. But in terms of prep and how I felt about it, yeah, it was a lot of nerves.
Yes.
Well, let's think back and kind of consider for you, Ryan. Do you remember the first session you had?
Yes.
And it's a bit...
I do.
Okay, you do. Go ahead.
It's ingrained in my memory forever. We've talked about it a little bit before, and I'll talk about both session 1s that we've had. The first one, as I mentioned, I think maybe our first podcast or one a while back, was heavily based upon the Dalian Tomb by the YouTuber Matt Colville. If you're listening to the podcast, you may have heard of him. He's a pretty popular guy. He has a live D&D show now on Twitch and does just a lot of kind of D&D stuff. And I just got into D&D, and I just like, it's like young Braxton over there, and probably any new DM just overwhelmed. You don't know where to start, especially if you come in from watching like the Adventure Zone or Critical Role, where everything seems so put together, and you want to do that, but where do you start? How do you get going? So I watched the Dalian Tomb one that it's just basically a small little dungeon, a little tomb. I really didn't have anything prepped farther than that because I didn't know if we were going to play ever again. I was just kind of treating it as a one shot. I got some players together, some friends, and we just gave it a shot. And out of those 4 people, only 2 ended up staying on longer for the full rest of that campaign. You and my girlfriend at the time. And maybe she was only there because she was my girlfriend at the time. I don't know if she would have continued playing. I think she enjoyed it.
She did stop at some point.
Yes, she didn't decide to stop at some point down the line. But
and that was before you broke up.
Yes, that's besides the point.
I think that is the point.
But because I didn't know we were going to ever play again, I didn't really make much else for session 1. After that, and we decided to continue playing, I kind of started fleshing out the small little section of the world that we had set out. I started expanding, but I think the most important thing, and I'll get to this in a moment when we talk about more prep stuff, is I started small. You want to start small when it comes to, especially if you're home brewing a world. You don't want to just make the entire kingdom right off the bat. Have a cool idea, a cool little prompt, a little hook or something in a section of the world, and prepare around that, and then slowly, move out from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. This is just a little analogy, and I'm
Yeah.
so excited that I'm able to bring this in. This is
no.
not an anime podcast at all.
Yeah.
But, oh boy, do I love me some JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah.
Don't worry, there will be no spoilers here. Don't click away. Don't do it.
Run!
Okay. No.
Oh.
So, in part 3, it's a very worldly experience. This group starts off and they travel the entire globe searching for this one person for a specific reason that I will not divulge because spoilers. But as a result, the world feels very thin because they just kind of poke into certain areas on certain episodes. With part 4, the entire thing takes place in one town. And by the end of that series, you know every character, you know that town so well, and it feels like a more complete experience. Exactly. And of course, you can do that worldly exploration thing, and I wouldn't know how to do it properly, but I really do enjoy the starting small.
Mm-hmm. Make the area where the players are starting feel real and important. Spend time on the NPCs, crafting them, making sure that they're well-rounded and meaningful to the players, because odds are, from what I've learned, the starting area is always going to hold a special place in the heart of your players. They're always going to remember it and want to kind of head back, see how those NPCs are doing, see how the village is doing. Unfortunately, in the first campaign, the party never experienced this, but I thought it'd be fun. And this is the fun side of being a DM. I thought it'd be fun if the next time the party went to that village, it was in tatters. It was massacred. This is in the first campaign, and there was gonna be some cool quests and stuff going on after that, but the party just never ended up making it back there.
Okay, sorry, this is getting into personal stuff, but which town was this and who was there? I can't remember. It's been a long time.
It was Highdale. And there was just the only cool guy that you guys liked was the barkeep.
Wasn't that where we initially saw the Red Plague or whatever?
Yes, there was some plague stuff going on there as well.
Okay,
yeah.
I remember now. That's rude. Oh, okay. Oh, no. In our current campaign, we're going back.
Yes, you guys are. Probably at some point, I would think. Anyway.
Save me.
Anyway, pulling back on in.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think starting like that, and why I think the Dalian Tomb is a good starting thing, is because sure, it starts, and I hate the trope about starting in a tavern. A lot of people think it's a bad thing. What better way to introduce everybody than everyone's hanging out at a tavern? I think it's fine. If you want to do it, go for it. I don't think there's any harms in it. But
I think it's fine as well.
Yeah,
but
I think it's more than okay.
Yeah, we did recommend this on the previous episode, I believe. Try to connect your characters at least somewhat beforehand.
Yes.
The whole qualm with the tavern thing is it's a lazy way to smack your group together. But it's okay if you put a little bit of a preface beforehand.
I think what makes it a good session 1 as well is because it gives your players a time to get to know each other. There's no pressing matter, so they can just hang out and chat in the tavern for a moment or two. You can also give them some role-playing opportunities just with NPCs. Have the barmaid come up and chat with them, or some guy hears them, or one guy doesn't like the way he's looking at them, or so just small little things. Maybe you can burst out into combat. But overall, I think you want to have a hook, some hook. Like in the Dalian Tomb, a guy comes in asking for help because goblins took his kid. Something along those lines. And I can't
remember that.
Yeah, I can't remember if in the Dalian Tomb for that Matt Koval, I don't remember if I did how much exactly I followed it, but there's small little things you can push along with it. And I kind of had an idea for a cool, scary NPC guy who his name is Leonie Girard. You may remember.
Oh my God.
He was there from the first session.
Until the last one too.
Pretty much, yeah. He talked with the NPC or with the players in the bar. They thought it was a cool, nice guy. Turns out he was this evil guy that was kind of sneaking up and wanting to see if these guys were kind of powerful enough to get kind of like the Joker. He wanted to play with his food before actually killing them. He wanted to see if they were worth continuing to mess
Freaking
with.
level 1 dude wanted to become a lich.
Yeah. So, it was some fun.
Yeah. Don't you me.
Yeah.
You murder us.
Well, he wasn't a lich yet. See, that's the point. He had aspirations, as you guys had aspirations. So I think it's fun to introduce NPCs that will be memorable to the players. And if you have an idea for an overarching story, go ahead and start leaking it in session 1.
Rumors are also a really great thing to do.
Yes. And there's some great tools to just look up and make up some rumors.
Yeah, I saw one earlier. Hell, I have that in my tab. Let me shout it out.
He has it right there. Hell.
Where is it? Podcast, PC, D&D tools. Whispers in the Bar. Okay, so it's on Reddit.
Okay.
Let me shout out this guy. It's by... Oh, it's the author of the Lex Arcana. It's user Ross_Hollander. And it's titled Whispers in the Bar, 4D100 potentially ridiculous rumor generator. You know what? This is random, but say you're in session 1 and they're in a bar and you're like, man, I really want something kind of quirky and interesting to set now.
I'd love to.
Within session 1. And, say like 4 sessions down the line or a couple months ahead of that, you come back and this rumor comes to fruition and people are just like, wait a minute, did you plan this? And you go, I didn't, but you don't tell them that.
Yeah, so, you always tell them yes.
The first thing that you roll is, they say, and then you roll a D100. So I've received a 15. Let's go to 15. A militant emperor in the West. Okay, so we go to the next part. Oh, man, this is long. Oh, no. Wait, what's the next part? Okay, militant emperor in the West. Roll again. So we got 93. Let's go all the way down. Militant emperor in the West used slaves and prisoners for...
For what?
And 60. Scrolling down. Making theatrical declarations of war against non-existent countries.
Interesting.
That's actually really fun.
It's quite the rumor.
But is it something that you even need to act on? Because who's he harming?
Well,
he's just kind of like...
The important thing about the rumor is maybe the person telling it doesn't know they're non-existent countries or something.
Oh.
I think, the beautiful thing about rumors is, and a lot of people will kind of take them at face value, even players will, but as a DM, you can lead players in certain directions depending on hopping into the NPC's mind and thinking, how would they interpret this rumor? You got to think of it like a game of telephone. It goes down the line until it's not even close to the rumor, to the actual fact anymore. It's just twisted imagination of what actually is happening.
Okay, so real quick, I wanted to back up because I know as a DM just starting out, I was worried about how many things I had in front of me and what I needed to prepare. Ryan, give me a minimum couple of things, like absolute must-haves for feeling prepared, being prepared for that session 1, just so people can feel like they've learned something.
I'd say know the basics of the game that you're playing. If you're not playing D&D, or if you're playing Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu, something, whatever format you're playing, know the basics. You don't have to know everything, not even close to everything, just the basics, so you can tell your players what to do. You can ask them specific things, act like you know what you're doing. I would also say, like we mentioned before, have a hook, have something prepared, as well as a way for the party to meet each other. Other than that, I don't think you need too much to be prepared. Like I said, a starting location is obviously ideal. A starting quest, something like that. Another cool way to introduce people, and this is what we did in the second campaign, is have a festival. That's a great way for people that might not normally get to meet each other are all heading somewhere for a festival. And there you go. You're just hanging out. And then
you like your festivals.
Yeah, festivals are fun. And then, oh no, something attacks the festival. Everyone freaks out and the party bands together to fight.
And then it's fun from there because everybody knows the party.
Yes.
You're just walking around and people are like, wow, you saved us.
It's the saviors.
Like, I just was playing D&D and there were monsters in front of me and I killed them.
I was just here shooting some arrows at a hay bale. And then, oh my goodness.
Hoo boy. Yeah. And then I know I always prefer to have some form of blank page or paper or screen in front of me so I can take notes.
Yes.
Your previous session will always inform your next one. It's going to be your best resource, I think. But make sure you've got any monsters in front of you. Like Ryan said, the
Oh, yes.
basics. Resources are a big part. So anything that you think you might use in the session, bring it up. But again, in that same statement I just said, don't bring everything.
Yeah, don't get overwhelmed.
Try to make yourself a player here and come in and improv and just have a blast. That's the way I found I started to enjoy DMing more, is when I viewed myself more as a player who's playing every single thing other than the players.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way to look at it.
It's a good way to look at it. But on the player side of things, man, I guess I haven't had a ton of session ones like in our. It was in our first episode. It was a couple episodes ago where I said we'd had 2 session ones, and you went, "Well, it depends on what you consider a session 1 or session 0."
Which you could also we'd say is a good or bad thing. It's good that you've had lots of long campaigns, but maybe bad that you haven't had enough
Yeah.
D&D in your life.
Well, for the sessions that I've been to in the very early stages of a campaign, I go in and I don't think I think enough about my character. And it's hard to be committed to it right away because, again, like Ryan said, you don't particularly know if this is going to go anywhere. Is it worth the effort? Is it worth getting dedicated to this character? And I'll argue that it is, regardless of it's a one shot or, people will have a terrible time in that session. You don't think you're ever going to play with them again. You can always take that character to another campaign. Always. Yeah. I basically do. I'm very basic and I play the same character type every session. I think video games bred that habit into me because we won't get into that. We can talk about that another time. But I would find myself not knowing how to interact with the other players, and I think that's the biggest disservice that I could do to the group. You want to pretty much be the most fleshed out character there.
Well, it's like meeting a bunch of new friends for the first time, like a camp or something. You got to feel everybody out and see how they act, how they react to you, their belief system, stuff like that. Especially if you're getting together. Sure, you might have had a session 0 beforehand, but if you're just hopping in to this fun D&D world with some people that you might not have ever really met before, so it can be a little intimidating, I think, at first.
Yeah, and anytime you'd brought somebody in off of Reddit, I freaked out. This was in person, to preface for all of you listeners out there, because we usually now play over Discord, but Ryan had brought in, I think was it just one? It was just him at the time, right?
Yeah, yes.
Later, you'd brought in 2.
Yes.
Yeah. So the guy that's currently, and we've talked about him before, in our campaign right now, he's been here ever since Ryan messaged him on Reddit. And
that was a while
he just
ago.
showed up, and I was like, this is a stranger who I've never met. Reddit is a scary place.
Yeah, I remember being super nervous whenever we were waiting for him in my apartment.
Yeah. So I had even less of an idea on how to interact with this person, let alone in game in a character that they're pretending to be. And I think in one of our more recent first sessions, I had made the decision to make my character silent.
Yes,
which is
did.
ridiculous. I don't know why I did that. Right now, it fits in his backstory and it makes sense. I've flipped that around. But I had taken the pointed opinion that my character would not even talk to these people unless they were worth it. And granted, that doesn't breed the best conversation, but at least I was thinking about how my character would view people that come into his, conversation bubble, so to speak.
I mean, I could also say, you mentioned before how you didn't like kind of being the de facto leader. And in this way, you are just, it's impossible for you to be a leader if you're not saying anything. So I think it gives you a good way to hopping into the first session, laying out that the thing of, I don't want to be the guy that talks all the time. I want to have you guys all say things and I can say things as well. So I think it was, I kind of think it was a smart move.
Yeah, I was very worried about not necessarily becoming the person that's always front facing. I do love playing characters like that, but I want my fellow cohorts to feel like they have just as much of a right to speak as I do and to really start developing their characters. Now, I think me trying to backstep it a bit throughout the campaign has really bred a wonderful dialogue between every one of our characters. It's been absolutely wonderful. I love our campaign so much.
Last month or so has been some great conversations and cohesion between the party.
It really does start with session 1. Of course, it's something that makes me always feel kind of guilty is if I don't prep my character's backstory in the beginning. He ends up being this amorphous blob without a backstory, and things just change all the time, and I find that I'm settling into the character halfway down. Whereas, yes, if you prepare a backstory, you may have to be a bit dedicated to it. Nothing is completely set in stone. You can always adjust how things are.
Especially before it comes up.
Absolutely. So communicate with your DM and absolutely tell your DM your backstory. But if there's something that you ever want to change and it hasn't been presented to the world yet, let your DM know and say, hey, this part of my backstory, first of all, hopefully this doesn't alter things that you've got planned. Ryan's response is usually, hey, I mean, if that's how it is, I can change it. Because his viewpoint is, if it hasn't happened yet, not set in stone.
I want to make sure you guys are enjoying what you're playing. That's a good. Yeah. That's a big part of it, is making sure you enjoy your character and their backstory.
Absolutely. So session 1, I always found it very hard to get a dialogue going with any of the characters, because a lot of the time people are new at D&D, and you know, I'm a theater student, or was. I gotta stop saying that. I'm a graduate now. Oh man,
old habits die hard.
Okay, existential crisis passing. I was a theater student, so I wanted to perform and act and talk with these people in game as my player character, but they weren't as used to that.
Yeah, it can take people, especially if they have played D&D before. Maybe that campaign wasn't that roleplay heavy.
Yeah, I got surprised when some of my sister's fiance, actually, that's a weird thing to say, having a lot of existential crises right now. But he said, "Oh yeah, I mean, if you had time to DM, possibly, and you know, it's a sore point right now because I was doing 2 sessions, couldn't handle it, but they suggested a Monday start time, which would have been perfect for me. Call back to our scheduling episode, go watch that or listen to it if you haven't." But it said, okay, so if you guys did a session with me, would you want to be more combat focused or more RPG focused, or maybe like 60-40? And they go, oh, combat. And I went, huh? Right off there, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be the best DM for them. I know for a fact that anybody loves a good story, and if I had combat elements and got them invested enough, they'd be fine with a 60-40%. But of course, I would make that session 1 more combat heavy for them so that they would enjoy it. That caught me off guard. I'll just say
that's why it's good to, as we said last podcast, it's important to vocalize that type of stuff of what type of game you want to perform, you want to do.
Exactly. And hopefully through your session 0, it's helped you as a DM decide how you're going to run your first session. That's how you transition from those two. Always take notes, but don't let it distract you too much while you're in the middle of a session. There's so many things to keep track of, but have no shame in asking your players, hey, what was this part, or what did your character say during the session? They'll be more than happy. Like what went on. Ryan was telling me earlier, the same guy that we got off of Reddit, he writes or remembers everything. He's written this index, this glossary of terms, places, people, and has descriptions for each of them. And I was talking to Ryan, thinking about how funny it is because Ryan technically has the same thing. And then you've got another player who's taking notes of this thing that you've created. And I think that's probably a really cool feeling for you, that somebody cares enough to do that. But Ryan had forgotten the name of somebody and actually went to this player's notes and
very useful,
referred to it. So if you make a great session 1, you continue to forge an interactive and fun and enjoyable session and campaign, you're gonna get people like our Reddit friend who I'm saying that
you can also get as a player, I would assume, and even as a DM, you can start forming kind of bonds with these people because you've experienced things that other people haven't together. Even though they're technically not real, it feels real in the moment, at least if the game is flowing very well.
Absolutely. And it's hard getting that in the session 1, but
Yes,
You
it
never know.
usually kind of comes over time, unless you guys have known each other for ages and ages, and this is like your second campaign maybe together.
Yeah, that was our case. Kind of, we lost a bit of players.
Yeah.
Um, but as with any relationship or friendship, that first meeting versus the 80th time you've been on a date or you've hung
Yes.
out playing video games together. Of course, you're gonna
It's gonna
have
be a
the
little different.
perspective of this person has changed, but honestly, you've just kind of figured out who they really are as a person.
Yeah, you've
Um,
grown together.
yeah, a lot of the people we play with, in the beginning, we're just like, yeah, I play D&D with them, but now I really feel like we're great friends, and it's been pivotal in my sanity as I've moved to a state across the entire
Yeah.
country. I forget how far this
Yeah,
is.
he's pretty far from us now.
And I was
But we
talking
still
to somebody
play.
at work, and they said, "You moved from Texas? That's a huge move." And I hadn't actually thought about it now. And I look back on our first sessions and now to where we've changed mediums completely, and we're on Discord and still willing to play together
At
and
least you're
adjust
on
things.
Discord.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
we're
you.
all still in person, and we were able to Discord in our friend here to keep playing. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So things start small. Just to reference what we said earlier, even outside of the campaign, session one doesn't need to be humongous, but
Mm-hmm.
feel prepared enough to facilitate a great campaign.
Yeah,
Continue
start having
forward.
as a DM, just start having ideas. So some ideas of different plots and things you have. Like for example, technically it wasn't session one, but I could have made it into. Actually, we might have been session one where we've mentioned this before. The party met a blacksmith, and he was like, "Hey, there's some stuff happening down. I'm not able to get the materials I need, so the price is a little more expensive. If you guys are able to figure that out, please come back, and I will be glad to give you a discount on some of these goods."
Man, fast forward like 20 something sessions later, and
Yeah,
like
and there they are.
nearly a year and a
They
half
find out what's going
probably,
on.
we go there. And then from that point, another rumor that we had known about since the beginning of time, miasma, this breach in our world's like fabric between the planes.
Multiverse.
We had finally got there, and man, it was crazy. So players, take note of everything your DM says, because it'll pay off eventually, whether they've prepared it or not. And don't be
Yes.
disappointed if they haven't prepared it, but if they're really caring about this campaign, you'll be surprised by the connections you make from session one all
Though
the way to the next session.
I did have a little bit of a, not really a cheat, but for the second campaign, I took about a year-ish break between them
Right.
and took what I'd learned and then just went crazy prepping the world. And maybe that's the type of DM you are as well, the type of person where you like just writing and expanding the world and having cool things, writing down story ideas and different plots and things that are occurring during this stuff. But even still, I think, and you could tell me if it worked out. But even still, we started off small. I didn't just drop them and explain this crazy huge world to them. We started small at a little village at a festival where they saved it, and slowly the plots kind of trickled out from there as they've expanded and leveled up and explored the world.
Exactly. So, Ryan, there's a wonderful resource that you gave to me before I had one of my first one shots a while ago. Do you want to? And sorry, we're talking about this right now on the podcast, so I'm sorry if we don't talk about it. But
now maybe I don't know what you're talking about.
No, we'll see. No, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Lazy DM.
Yeah.
Guy.
Great
Do you want to
stuff.
talk about that now, or do we want to have an entire podcast dedicated to?
I mean, we can
prep.
I think we definitely will and shall and should, but we can mention it at the very least. Get you guys to check it out. The lazy DM, right? Or lazy, is that what it's called? Lazy DM guide.
I need to find it, because honestly, any of you that are listening right now and a bit worried and don't understand how much you need to prep, this book got rid of all of my worries. We're not. We're a small podcast. We're not sponsored or anything. I just loved this, and I'm looking at.
I mean, he's the guy that makes it. He's very active on Twitter. Sly Flourish. If you guys want to check him out, he's technically the one that I showed to Braxton here is the second edition of this lazy DM book. I believe it was maybe Lazy GM. Yeah, the Lazy Dungeon Master. Yeah, there it is. You can buy the original on his website here, slyflourish.com, for $5.99, which is still a great resource. Definitely recommend it.
That's heckin' cheap, man.
But he's got the second edition, the Return, of the lazy dungeon master, which has even more in it. And also there's a workbook and stuff that comes with it. You can get a soft cover, hardcover edition, and even still, it's like $8. So for what you get in it, it's definitely worth checking out.
And not to deter from the price, but it is a relatively quick read, and it's packed with wonderful stuff. Mm-hmm. Just looking at my notes here, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions or five sections really that can prepare you. It starts with a strong start, and then you write potential scenes. You get some secrets and clues that you want your party to find. You come up with fantastic locations that they can come across, and big ticket NPCs.
Big ticket.
And that's kind of the overview of a lot of what's in that book. And this is the most like note-taking I've done for a campaign ever. And I love looking at it because it makes me proud of this prep I did. It was all facilitated through that book. So take a look at that. Please do, and support that man because he's doing wonderful work. And Lazy DM, looking at your session 1 plan notes, don't feel ashamed for being a quote-unquote lazy DM. Look at it as a good way. And if you're the Ryan type who really wants to prep everything, that's not bad either. That's wonderful. If you want to take a year to write a campaign and go back to that scheduling point and really try to find players that are going to meld with that campaign, I can recommend that you should be very specific in who you find if you've written a lot of stuff. If you're the type of DM who improvises more, find anybody and alter towards them. So that's kind of the path I see for those 2 styles of DMing. But that book, ooh boy, is it wonderful, and I love it so much.
I guess get into the ending here, at least of the campaign, or starting a campaign. A couple other ways that you could also start people instead of, kind of the stereotypical festivals and inns, is to, if you want to skip those kind of awkward first meetings, then you want to start before the session begins. You want to start the game, if that makes sense. Tell them kind of what you have in mind. Maybe there's a quest and all the party has agreed. There was like a notice board in an inn maybe at some point, but they agreed to go kill the undead and are meeting along the road, along their travels, heading this direction. So you start ahead of time, let them know. Granted, like what we mentioned in session 0, you want to tell them what type of campaign you're playing. Maybe have a little little voting thing. You have 4 different plot ideas. One's in a big city, one's exploring a desert, and they choose the desert one. So then they know where they're heading. They know why their players may be in that area. Just, small things like that. And if, like we mentioned as well, already knowing each other can be great. Have some relationships built ahead of time. That'd be delicious.
I have spent the past 45 seconds trying to find the term for starting after the main point of action. I learned all about this in school.
Yeah.
Cannot for the life of me remember this. And I think we talked about this before and I couldn't remember either. So obviously I didn't look it up.
Well,
I'm sorry.
In writing, in my creative writing class,
it's the same thing probably.
Yeah, well, the professor always said, start as close to the end as possible. Start as close to the most interesting parts of the story as you possibly can get. That way, especially for short stories, so that way the reader is as interested as possible. And you want this. I think you want the same thing for your players and your party.
Absolutely. I just want to know what that term is.
It's gonna kill
Next
you.
episode, I'm gonna start it with that. I will
hopefully
figure it out. Hold me to this. I need to back up my promises because I had said we were going to do session 1 last week. We didn't.
So now Braxton's a liar. I don't know who to trust anymore.
I'll just walk out. Can't trust me anymore.
Something that came up that I forgot to mention earlier when you were talking about things that you should have as a DM for session 1. Random generators are, I think, the most important. You want to have this for every session. Have these generators nearby, print out a huge list of names to just be ready if the party decides to. I'm the type of player, and Braxton can attest to this type of player, that will just grab a random citizen and start asking them questions, and I'll probably ask their name if I'm playing a character that would care about that. I'll probably ask them their name, and you need to have some names prepared for players like that.
So, your players go into a bar and they want to order something from the barkeep.
Mm-hmm.
Pull up dungeon.bin.sh, and dungeon is spelled D-O-N-J-O-N.
Donjon, yeah.
Donjon. It has a whole slew of random generators. The first one's a fantasy name generator. You can pick the type: common names, monstrous names, outsider names, fantasy setting names, ancient world. Let's just go with common names because it's a barkeep and you're in a pretty chill town. And then you pick their ethnicity and race. Are they human male? Are they dwarvish male? Are they an elvish female?
Let me stop you right there, though. Let me stop you right there.
Oh, I was on a roll.
I know, but since we're in an inn, how about we go to the fantasy random inn generator on Donjon?
Fantasy random inn? What the heck? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it shows you a location,
Random
a
inn
description,
generator?
an innkeeper. It even has
The menu! The most important part. You need to know what you're eating.
the patrons, the other patrons that are in there, and then some rumors.
So you've got the type: poor inn. Is it a common inn or a good inn? We're at a good inn. I treat my players. Patrons? Who's there? Adventurers or townsfolk? Let's go with some townsfolk. Okay. All right. So do I press refresh?
Nope, it does that automatically.
Oh. Okay, so this is the Spear of Lightning Inn. Location is Upper Golden Norp Way, in a civic district of royal offices and envoys of distant lands. The street outside is filled with strange languages and accents. The description is: the inn is a 2-story timber and brick building with a slate roof. Accommodations consist of several small rooms and beds and woolen mattresses. The inn has recently become infested by pixies. What the heck? Okay, Innkeeper. The Innkeeper is an industrious female halfling named Lane. It even gives you the name.
Yep.
She has an identical twin who works opposite shifts. Need a name for her.
Isn't that fascinating, though?
That's so cool. Menu is baked dragon and rye biscuits with glass of rum for 4 silver pieces.
Now, a lot of the things like this, if you need to just pull them out in session, you didn't prep an inn and they're going to an inn, great. Stuff like this, though, I usually use as inspiration for my prep. I'll find some that's kind of cool. Like pixies, there's pixies in an inn. Okay, that could be a fun little quest hook, or just a fun little quirk of this inn. And she's got a twin that will probably throw off the party. They try to talk to her about something they talked to earlier, but it's a different dwarven lady.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah, so some cool stuff there. Always have random generators and things prepared for that type of stuff.
Yeah, so for you DMs that like to improv stuff, but you need a little bit of direction, you got your session 1 coming up, and you don't really know what to do for your N, go to donjon.bin.sh.
Or something that I've used
inspiration.
In session as well as out of session is go to a local game store, or you can order them online. They're these little cubes called Rory's Story Cubes.
Those are cool.
That you can just grab a whole bunch of them, roll them, and it's just pictures on these dice, and you can force your little improv brain to make a world or make a quest around these pictures. There's actually one I got recently that's a dungeon themed version that was actually got kickstarted, so it's pretty great.
He kickstarts everything. 2 things.
2 things, all right.
1, players, how unnerving is it when your DM just randomly rolls dice?
I do that
He does this with those all the time and will be doing nothing. In hindsight now, of course, he's rolling the dice so he can get something going on.
Or I'm just rolling nothing.
He probably does do that.
I have, especially if you guys are in a dangerous area. Sometimes I'll roll something with maybe the intention of something happening, and maybe not. But I always, whenever I roll, one of our players gives me an eye, and he's like, "Yeah, maybe we should. We're doing this while we're walking. We're moving."
Is that me or is it somebody else? I definitely
it's
give
somebody
you that,
else.
but
It's tough. It's tougher to see with you on the computer now, but you probably do as well.
Yeah, I definitely do.
Especially because your mic is right next to the dice now.
Yeah, I hear everything you do. What was the second thing I was going to say? Oh, yeah. Keep those brick and mortar stores alive. All of these online resources are indeed wonderful and magical and technologically advanced and spooky, maybe kind of, because aliens made these things. And if we keep relying on them, we'll die.
You lost me.
I did. I lost myself. But keep those places alive. Go to them, support them. You'll meet a whole bunch of people. They run a lot of one-shots, and that's a freaking galore of session ones.
Oh, yes.
If you want to know some great ways to start a first session, go to those one-shot events and hang out with people. My other friend who DMs all the time now, he's been doing it for like a year and a half, goes to those exclusively. And, you know, the first time I played with him to now, he's like a freaking different person in terms of his skill as a dungeon master. Go out there, get into that store, talk to people. I know it's scary. Do it.
I'll do a little shout out here. If you guys want to check out our Twitter, we check out some different one shots and different companies. There's one recently that I've kind of fallen in love with called Cauldron and Tower. They recently published a adventure called Wolf Lord of Yol. That is pretty great. I haven't used it at all yet, but I've read through it and it's got some fantastic stuff. 45 pages, $10, a lot of stuff in there. Even if you decide not to run the campaign or the adventure, there's still just some great resources in there to check out.
I swear, if I started reading more resources, I would just spoil things for our campaign because you read.
I mean, yeah,
everything.
I do, but I also reskin a lot of it, so you might not recognize it immediately at the very least.
You doubting my ability to notice things?
But speaking
you
of,
are pretty nifty.
Speaking of that, the final thing that I can think of for talking about a session one is, let's say you're not homebrew. Pretty much all we've been talking about is homebrewing a campaign. If you're starting from scratch, where do you go? But there's a second option. Actually, there's a lot of other options. But you could be using a pre-made adventure, a module made by Wizards of the Coast or by some other companies. There's some great ones out there. Find one that you think would be of interest to your group. Maybe, I mean, you can tell them. I like not telling them if we're doing a module because then they don't know what's coming, especially if they've read it. For example, we've said this before, I ran about maybe a quarter to a half of the Curse of Strahd book and reskinned a lot of it, and they had no idea until I told them.
No clue, and my other DM friend who I just mentioned was running his campaign through Curse of Strahd, and they knew. I was like, oh, that's cool. I've never heard of Curse of Strahd. Little did I know I was literally playing it, adjusted by Ryan.
And we had another player who said, did you run this? Because I remember I was reading it or I was watching somebody do it, and I remember something similar in one of our last campaign. Oh, yeah, we did about half of that book. If you're doing a module, you can either run it exactly as is. The only reason I don't like doing that is because you have to know more or less, you don't have to know the entire book, but you have to know where it's heading and you have to know specific facts. And I'm always worried that I'm going to screw up the facts and screw up the story. So I reskin it entirely and make it my own story so that way I know what I'm doing and I can't screw that up.
Yeah, if you do a module, you'll need to set some time aside to read it and
just
really understand. And
delve into
for people like me that feel a bit more lazy about DMing, it is a bit to undertake. You start reading it and they've got this whole preface of just this is the world and the setting, and it's kind of daunting because it's like, do I need to do this if I'm homebrewing my own session? No. You do as much as you need to, but do definitely read through those because you'll find it invaluable. Even if you don't use it for that session, there's a wealth of things to learn. I think a lot of Ryan's advancement as a DM is because he reads so much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I say. The best way to become a better writer is to write and read constantly. And I think the same way is for playing Dungeons and Dragons. Just play a lot, read a lot, watch a lot of it, grab what makes it interesting.
Of voice acting and animation, right? Because I've watched so much anime.
I don't know if that translates the same.
No?
Yeah, it'd be nice if it did.
It would be nice. It would be very nice because then I'd feel a lot more productive. But it's not the case whatsoever.
No.
So I think I've talked about everything I wanted to mention. We always finish these episodes and I listen and I'm like, should have talked about that. So is there anything that we can think of as a last effort to inform these people on how to do a session one? Anything at all?
There is no one way to do it. Just have fun with it, man. Enjoy your players, enjoy what you're doing. And if you find for whatever reason you play session one and it's not for you, let them know and say, hey, I checked it out. I didn't really enjoy it, but I appreciate it. And then maybe if you're the DM and you're hearing this from one of your players, you say, hey, well, let me try tweaking some things. Maybe I can understand why you didn't enjoy it, and let's give it another shot. And if they still don't enjoy it, then maybe it's just not for them.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Things go all sorts of ways. You really never know what's going to happen with Dungeons and Dragons. And that's the fun about it.
That is the fun.
If you're like me and you've got that, sweat beating down the entire time because you're so stressed that everything is going awry, enjoy it. Because honestly, that's what I think makes us human, is the ability to feel like that. Doing these imaginary games and sessions where we gather and have fun. So, in hindsight and in light of that, let's do our little improv sesh at the end.
Okay.
Here. So I think I've already got the link prepped.
Perfect. That's preparation.
Oh, it rolls right away. I don't like going with that first number.
Does.
I don't like that. I wanna choose my fate.
If you're new here, this is the time of the podcast where we find, because eventually we're gonna have to change.
Yeah, if we do this 100 times.
Actually, we have to be a lot more than 100 times. But it's a roll sheet that we found on D&D behind the screen on Reddit, where the _Crimson, and eventually I should probably reach out to the guy and say we've done this so many times now.
Yeah.
But he made a roll sheet that has, he says he uses it to create unique objects and entities for his stories, or for their stories. And we've been kind of using it for some good fun.
It's
What'd you get?
very good fun. I got a 92.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That'll be a tapestry. Ooh, interesting.
Wow, okay.
What kind of tapestry, though? That's the main question.
Roll that dice. Feel like I've gotten this number before. 75.
75, he says. 75. An unstable tapestry.
All right, give me a second. I got the juices flowing.
Gotta get them juices.
Unstable tapestry.
Unstable. It's not stable at all.
Okay.
All right.
It's at the end of a large battle. Blood is strewn all over the field. The ruins of the castle once stood proud upon this land. After the Lich King came and sent his army towards the town, you decided that this would be a great bulwark to thwart his forces. You didn't know it would be this hard. You didn't know this many people would die.
I didn't.
You take a look at all those fallen before you, and you do feel victorious. But you're the only one standing. You look back towards the castle, the only standing wall that's left. The tapestry of your story. The tapestry of your kingdom's history. Torn, burned, flowing through the wind. And with one last gust of wind, it flies off of the wall that has always been upon for many generations and is swept up into the wind. Bam, that was short.
Come back. Wait.
Okay, there you go.
It's
That
unstable.
took me a second. It's unstable.
Damn.
A lot of ways it could have gone with that, but that's something that like popped in my brain.
Yeah, that was pretty nice. I enjoyed it.
All right, Ryan. Your
Sure,
turn.
yeah. Roll that dice. Oh, okay. 93.
Again? Didn't I get 93?
They get 92. So mine's a sculpture.
Interesting. Is
But
it
what
unstable?
kind of sculpture?
Unstable
A
sculpture.
53. Oh. I'm so glad I didn't get 54. 54 was sweaty. A sweaty sculpture.
That'd have been great.
But 53 is a reality hopping sculpture.
That's even cooler.
Interesting. Okay. The party finds themselves descending ever deeper into the maddening tunnels of Kavath. The deeper they plunge, the more noises they hear from underneath.
What is that?
I don't know.
Should
The
we go
room.
investigate?
Yes. the staircase finally ends releasing them onto a cold cobblestone floor. Ahead there's a doorway, an arched doorway, and in the center of this arched doorway is a sculpture of some sort. Looking at it, after making a fantastic perception roll, they can see, that's amazing, they can see that there's this strange ooze resting and kind of piling around this sculpture. The sculpture itself appears to be a man, standing very tall and firm, wearing a long robe and a staff. At first glance, it appears to be the Mad Mage of Kavath himself. But the longer you look, it seems to morph into a reflection of you, of your friends. And then, in a flash, it's gone. Was that a trick of your imagination, or you turn around and ask the rest of your party members if they saw it, and they nod their heads. There was definitely something there. Then another flash, and in the far side of the room, the statue has returned, covered in this oozy substance. It appears to be moving. Roll initiative.
Well, damn.
Roll that initiative. Do it.
Roll it. Oh, what did I get? Let's do it. Everybody roll initiative just in my Twitter post. That's an 18 plus 2.
That's a shame.
What?
The creature.
Natural 20 plus 5. They're first.
Then you're dead. And if they get first initiative, they deal 50 damage to you. Level 1? Okay, you're dead.
It's a shame.
All right, we're getting better at that. Mine was more flavory, and yours was flavory with combat and the actual campaign. I liked mine a lot. It was cool. I hated yours a lot. Oh, it was so fun. All right, everybody.
Now you see the beauty of random roll tables. Always get fun, weird things. I guess we should maybe find a new one.
Yeah, at some point. I will mention that I've completely forgot what I was going to mention. Wow.
You forgot mid-sentence?
Yes.
How does that
my speaking to formulate this sentence actually led to me losing the sentence in my brain immediately. That was surreal. It's gone.
You have no idea what it was referring to.
It's gone. It is gone.
Mad Mage of Kavath. Improv. Random roll tables.
Oh, now we're getting it back. Hold on.
D20s rolling.
No, it's got to get... I can physically feel this memory coming in and out of my brain.
Well, you got to remember after we end the podcast, and it's not going to do you any good.
Okay, well, let's keep it up. What were you saying? I mean, like, where were you going? Were you saying something?
Well, I was just getting ready to start wrapping up here and saying, guys, if you're interested in what we do here, please check us out at our podcast, the Twitter page, at Dungeon Crawl Pod, as well as on Instagram.
Hell yeah, same,
Dungeon
man.
Crawl Pod.
I'm going to start trying to post a bit more on there, maybe get some interesting or funny or cool or sad clips from the episode to entice people to watch a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to really make this brand and get somewhere. Because honestly, I haven't enjoyed doing something as much as I have doing this in a long time. It doesn't take a ton of effort. I've got a busy life with work, and I just think podcasts are a great medium. So I'm having a blast.
It's good fun.
This is our 5th episode.
It is, and for our 6th episode, we actually I don't think we know what we're going to talk about.
We need to talk about that.
Well, we were considering, and then we may consider finishing off the series with your first boss, your first big bad. Whether we are going to do that, I'm not positive, but it could be a good conclusion to you are now starting D&D for the first time, your first campaign. What do you do?
I won't be the one to promise things. I'll let you be the liar this time.
Yeah, no promises, but that might be what we do.
He's promising.
No promises.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening this time. We are going to take a dippy do and get out of here and edit this episode and get it up for Tuesday.
And that was Braxton. This is Ryan.
That's Ryan.
Thanks for listening.
Is Braxton.
We'll be back next Tuesday. See you then.